This is the Thrive Podcast with Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. And now, Pastor Fred Jeff Smith.
Hello, welcome to the Thrive Podcast with the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. I believe this is episode number 14 of the Thrive Podcast, and we thank those of you who have been listening and or viewing. We are on iTunes and we are on YouTube, so you can get us one way or the other, and we thank you for sharing with us at this time. I'm very happy today to welcome back, and I was just saying to him that he is the first guest that we have had who is making a return visit to us. Pastor Dale Flowers, pastor of the New Sunlight Baptist Church of our city, pastor of the Redwood Baptist Church of Zachary, Louisiana, and the director of the Baptist Student Center at Southern University. Pastor Flowers, welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
I wanted to bring you back specifically. Well, first of all, I enjoyed the conversation that we had last time, but specifically, we're getting closer to the tax election that's coming up, and I know that this is an issue that is close to your heart. It's an issue that you've been working like a slave to try to get information out into the public. For those who are listening and are viewing and are not aware, Baton Rouge is being asked to renew school taxes on April 28th. A penny tax that is divided into three separate propositions, and we're being asked to renew a tax for the Baton Rouge Police Department. Yes. And in that, Pastor Flowers has been working so diligently, both as a pastor and as the president of the McKinley High School Alumni Association, with regard to these taxes. I thought it would be good to have him back and that we could have a discussion as to where we are with regard to these tax matters. So, just laying it right out there. The school tax measure is in three separate propositions. It's a penny tax divided three ways. One having to do with facilities, one having to do with discipline and truancy, one having to do with a pay raise.
That's correct.
Please share with me your views on each one of them, please, and take your time. Explain as you like.
Again, and thank you for having us again. Our conversations are great on or off camera.
Yes, sir.
So thank you. You're right, three propositions. On the first proposition that deals with facilities, that money will be used to build and renovate new schools across our parish. I'm not certain of the exact amount, but I think it's close to $400 million, somewhere around 377, I think it is. And that's a proposition that we're not supporting as the alumni of McKinley High School, as the South Baton Rouge community that we're speaking for, that we've spoken to. It just does not add up, one, for McKinley itself, because what is allotted is $35 million to renovate McKinley High School. This renovation includes tearing down the Buchanan High School, which is right next to McKinley High School, and using that property to build a 7th, 8th, and 9th grade facility. And then they'll renovate the current school, which will at that time will become 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So you'll have 6 grades, one campus, and that'll be the new McKinley High School. They're going to take that Buchanan property. They're going to move that school to where University Terrace is now. They're going to tear down the old University Terrace, build a new elementary school there, and that school will house the students from Buchanan as well as the University Terrace. And we think that is a good idea. So we will have schools at that time from pre-K, where you can remain in South Baton Rouge as a resident, from pre-K all the way to PhD, and never have to leave home in that South Baton Rouge community. So that's a great idea. We just don't think that the money is properly allocated for the high school. In the past, and I went back and looked at this, because what I kept hearing our superintendent, Dr. Drake, say is that they've always come under budget on every project. And we look at the last 2 high schools built in the city of Baton Rouge under the tax plan that we're currently under. Lee High School, over $50 million. Baton Rouge High School, over $50 million. I think they're around 53, 54, like that apiece. So I went back and I looked at the old plan, And both of those schools, Lehigh was budgeted for $58 million. Baton Rouge High was budgeted for $56 million. So he's right. They came under plan, but the budget was so much larger.
Yes.
And our question is, how can we say that we're going to build a state-of-the-art high school at McKinley for a budget of $35 million when we couldn't do it at either Baton Rouge High or Lehigh?
Right.
And it's not a knock against either of those schools. We think that those schools are outstanding. Their facilities are great.
Right.
We're just asking that we receive the same thing at McKinley High School.
Right.
We've spoken with the superintendent. We've spoken with some of his assistants. We've spoken with the attorney for the school board. And great conversations. There's nothing lacking in our conversation, but every meeting we leave, nothing changes.
Right.
So we voiced our concerns. They have not agreed to adopt any of our concerns. So now we're going to voice our concerns through our vote. And we're voting no on Proposition 1, no Proposition 1. Proposition 2, as you said, truancy, discipline, we're voting yes on that. And, of course, teachers' pay, number 3, we're voting yes on that because we believe that our teachers aren't being paid enough as is. So, of course, we're going to support that, and we are vociferously, making sure that people know we're supporting 2, we're supporting 3, and we're opposing 1. We want to leave no doubt as to the fact that we're supporting 2 and 3.
So we've had these conversations with the school board representatives, both the superintendent, the attorney, various school board members themselves, as well as, I'm sure, administrators and what have you.
Correct.
When you have voiced your concern, you individually and the Alumni Association and others that you have been with, what has been the general response to your concerns?
Well, honestly, they can't answer our questions, which is what this all boils down to. If you can answer questions and the answers make sense, we can move forward. This isn't something that we want to do, but we're being forced into it. We're asking simple questions. Okay, what did it cost you to build an auditorium at these other high schools? Give us that, and then we can say, okay, well, that makes sense. This is what it's going to cost at McKinley. What does it cost you to build a TV studio at Lehigh School or a photography studio? Give us these numbers so then we can say, okay, well, if it was done there at this amount, why are you now budgeting this amount for McKinley? And those are questions that they just refuse to answer. They dance around them and give us half answers. And then when we come back and we ask the question again, it's answered in a different way. We're just not getting consistent answers that would even... Is
there an actual plan for what McKinley will look like? I have been told that there is no plan for McKinley.
Correct.
We have been given artist renderings of a perception of what McKinley will look like. But if I'm correct, there is no actual plan for building McKinley High School.
There's nothing there.
So then I'm left to ask the next question, which is, how can you say it's going to cost X amount of dollars if you don't have a plan?
That's our questions. I mean, those are the questions that we're asking, and we're not getting answers to. The answers are not adequate. Again, you're going to allot $35 million. And then the other thing is this school won't be built until 5 years from now.
Right.
So you're saying that you projected $58 million for one school, $56 million for another school 10 years ago. And now, 10 years later, you're projecting $35 million for a school that won't be built until 5 years from now. And $35 million today isn't going to, well, $35 million 5 years from now is not going to do what $35 million would do today. So, I mean, all these questions, and I think they're used to us not asking questions. They're used to us just kind of going along. They present it and say, hey, guys, this is what we need. And we've done that for far too long, and I think that's why we're in the shape that we're in.
And this tax renewal is the fourth, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
The fourth time it was initiated, and then it's been renewed three previous times.
That's right. 5 years twice, and this will be the second 10 years.
So we're being asked to renew a tax that has been previously accepted. I don't remember them having this kind of push, them being the school board,
Yes.
having this kind of pushback
Yes.
on the tax renewal in these previous experiences.
Yes.
So this is an entirely new thing. To what do you attribute the pushback this time?
I think people are waking up across this parish. And not only is McKinley alumni against this, you've got over in North Baton Rouge quite a few groups that are against this proposal. The Capitol High School Alumni Association has voted not to support Propositions 1 and 2.
Right.
And, of course, they're supporting 3. Lehigh alum are not supporting Proposition 1. They're supporting 2 and 3.
So
and
Lehigh School alum,
I'm bad.
Glen Oaks.
Glen Oaks.
Okay.
I don't know why I said Lee. That's on my mind. Glen Oaks.
Okay.
Glen Oaks High School. Glen Oaks High School. They're opposing 1 and 2.
Okay.
Excuse me. They're opposing 1. I'll get it straight. They're opposing 1, and they're supporting 2 and 3.
Okay. If I'm not mistaken, again, of this 51% of this penny that's being dedicated to facilities expansion and technology, only 15% of those dollars are designated to schools in what we now classify as North Baton Rouge.
Yes.
Over a 10-year period.
Yes.
So over the next decade,
Yes.
we're only going to dedicate 15% of these dollars
You
to
hit it on the head.
anything
You hit
in
it.
North Baton Rouge.
Anything north of Florida
85% is being
South of
dedicated
Florida
to
Boulevard.
South.
Yes. And $80 million of that is going to a part of South Baton Rouge that is unnamed at this time because they've written it up as somewhere in the southeastern part of the parish. $10 million is dedicated to buy land somewhere in the southeastern part of the parish. $25 million is going to be dedicated to an elementary school somewhere in the southeastern part of the parish, and $45 million is dedicated to build I think, middle to high school somewhere in the southeastern part of the parish.
Yeah. Now,
And
on this subject, I'm a little bit familiar. I won't play the game as if I don't know.
Yeah.
I was at the meeting that we were invited to. Clergy was invited to.
Yes.
With regard to the tax, and the superintendent, when he got to this portion of his presentation, I personally asked
Yes, you did.
the question.
I was there.
There's $10 million set aside in year 1 to purchase land. And my concern is, are we talking about purchasing land that would ultimately be in the footprint of the proposed St. George
Yes,
community? And I was assured publicly that's not going to happen. We're not going to buy anything that will be a part of St. George. But you will not say specifically where it's going to go.
Yes,
In
sir.
fact, what the superintendent said was, we're looking seriously at using the old Arlington property. To
Yes,
which
sir.
I didn't ask the question, but in my mind, why do you need $10 million to buy
You already own it.
if you already own
Yes,
the
sir.
land?
Yes, sir.
That makes very little sense.
Those are the kind of answers that we're getting.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of answers to our question that just don't make sense. They just don't. I mean, and I was in a meeting Monday, and this came up again. And this representative from the school board readily admitted that it's going to South to St. George. And his response was, well, they pay taxes too. Yeah, but they're trying to break away from the city of Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
So why would we spend $80 million to a part of the town that does not want to be a part of the city of Baton Rouge without at least getting something in writing, getting something documented that says, if you become your own city with your own school district, you're going to have to pay for these schools,
Yes.
or you're not going to receive this $90 million. Had that been done, there's nothing against schools in that area if they are indeed needed.
Sure.
But if you're breaking away to become your own city, why are we giving $80 million to a section of town that does not want to be a part of this city?
I saw this happen with Baker. I saw this
that's
happen
it.
with Central. I
So
saw
why?
this happen with Zachary. I don't see why we should just fall into this trap.
The same thing.
Again with St.
It's
George.
happened to us 3 times,
Yeah.
and we are going in with our eyes wide open,
Yeah.
and it's going to happen again. I mean, these things that are going on just don't make sense. None.
Well, at this point, we are about a week out. By the time this airs, we will be within a week of the actual election.
That's 28th of this month.
So, what are your efforts to inform your community as to your position?
Well, I appreciate you for having me on here. This is one of the avenues that we've used. We've been interviewed on Channel 2. We've been interviewed in The Advocate. As a matter of fact, there was an article in The Advocate just on yesterday. And our superintendent made the comment that he asked an architect, and the architect told him that $35 million was above ground at Lee High School, which means, and he said the rest of that money was used to move the ground around, move dirt around. There was a swell somewhere, and to put utilities in the ground. You put $20 million of our $20 million of our tax funds in the ground.
Right.
Where else are you doing that? I mean, that's fiscally irresponsible. But he said he had to ask the architect. You don't know?
Yeah.
I mean, those. When we listen, the more we hear. And I'm going off now.
No,
we're also.
You're making sense.
We're also. I was on Perspective, which is the NAACP radio show that airs on Tuesday, 106.1. We were there, getting information out, and we're out in the community. It's very grassroots. We don't have a lot of money. We recognize that our school board is using our tax dollars to campaign for this. So we're grassroots. We're on the ground. We're knocking on doors. We've got a few signs. We're putting those signs out. On tomorrow, we're going to be gathered at the Alumni Center, which is Saturday. We'll be at the Alumni Center. We're going to be making phone calls. We're going to be out in the community, planting signs, talking to individuals, letting them know exactly why we are doing what we're doing, what our perspective is, and why. We're going to be out this entire week. We're going to be out on corners throughout the city of Baton Rouge, waving our signs, letting people know, waving at folks, passing them out informational as to why we are not supporting one and why we are supporting 2 and 3. So all of these grassroots things are what we're doing. We're just counting on the public to hear us and understand us. There are a lot of rumors out there about what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Right.
We want everybody to know that our concern is not only for McKinley. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that's not our number one priority. Sure. I'm a graduate of McKinley, and us alum, we're concerned. Our history is historic. Our history is successful.
Right.
We want to make sure that our future is just as successful and just as grand. So that's what this fight is about. But it's also about all of our students in this parish, to make sure that every student in this parish not only has the facilities, but the programs and the teachers and the support staff to make them successful.
Yeah.
And it's time for us to say, time out, stop, now let's move forward.
You have been attacked personally.
Yes.
As being a one issue individual.
Yes, sir.
Would you like to respond to that?
Well, yeah, I was attacked along those lines, and this issue is of extreme importance to me. Now, I'm out in our community every day, all day, fighting for those who have to deal with police brutality, fighting with those who have to deal with poverty, fighting with those who have to deal with substandard housing, fighting for those who are dealing with crime, dealing with drugs, dealing with all of these ills that affect our community. Now, because this one has put me out front as far as media goes, this issue is important, but I believe that the city of Baton Rouge should work best for all of our citizens.
Absolutely.
And that's where I stand.
People should know that you are a leading voice in this community for social justice across all fronts, and not simply the school tax. And I don't say simply to diminish the importance of the school tax.
It's important.
I'll say this. I've already voted. I voted early. And I am urging every person of every color, of every hue who is able to vote, to vote. Please. I particularly urge African Americans to vote. For everybody else, it's a right. For African Americans, it's a responsibility.
That's right.
People bled and died to ensure that we had the right to vote. And I've said many times, I don't care if it's for dog catcher, I don't care if it's for President of the United States, whatever the issue is, if there's an election, I'm going to make sure that my voice is heard. So I'm urging everyone to vote. I'm urging everyone to become informed, to read, to deliberate, to discuss, to investigate, to ask appropriate questions, and then to most assuredly vote. But I've already voted, and my vote has been or was against Proposition 1, for Propositions 2 and 3, and my reasoning was simple. If you can't assure me that we're not going to be spending upwards of $80 million in an area that will ultimately become St. George, because I do believe that St. George will become a reality. If not this time around, then eventually, the next time around. If you can't assure me that the East Baton Rouge Parish school system is not going to devote $80 million to an area that will ultimately become St. George.
I agree.
And if you cannot more evenly disseminate these monies between North and South Baton Rouge, or North and South, northern and southern parts of the parish, where the northern part of the parish is only receiving 15% of these dollars, then for those reasons, in addition to concerns about McKinley High School, I'm not satisfied with voting yes on Proposition 1, and so I did not. I do believe that truancy and other areas of discipline need to be addressed, and so I support that, and I certainly believe that every teacher, every school system worker at every level deserves a pay raise, and so I did vote in favor of that. Let's assume that Proposition 1 fails, and the school system has to go back and start again. Do you have any idea, I know you're not a member of the school board, but do you have any idea what the timeline is as to when they can represent an idea?
It is my understanding, according to their attorney, and he said this publicly, that they have to bring it back before the end of this year, because of the way that it's worded, and the old tax will expire this year. So they've got from now until December to bring this back before the public, and we're going to urge them to do that. We're going to defeat Proposition 1. We want to sit down with them and have them really hear our voice. Let's talk about how we can be more equitable with this money, like you say, for North and South Baton Rouge, for all of our schools north of Florida Boulevard and our schools south of Florida Boulevard, because that's our Mason-Dixie line. So let's say whatever this amount is, how can we divide it up? How can we say 50%? Let's put 50% over here, 50% over there, and then let's see which schools, we can rebuild, which schools need to be renovated, and that's a more equitable route. Now, maybe you don't want to do that exactly, but we can start there, and then we can negotiate. We shouldn't be starting at 15%. Or I shouldn't say, we shouldn't be ending at 15%, because that's it. If this tax passes, 15% is going to North Baton Rouge, and 85% is going to South Baton Rouge, and $80 million of that is going somewhere in the southeastern part of the parish, and we have no idea where it is, even though we know it's St. George.
Let's hypothesize just a little bit farther. If this proposition is defeated and the school board goes back and begins to rethink what they will present to the community, and they determine that it requires more than the 51% of the penny, and that they wanted to tack on an additional millage to that, is that allowed under this system? Do you know?
I don't think it would be. I think that would be just a separate tax, because we got to remember those first two parts will have passed. So all they're going to have left is that 51%. Now, if they want to try a new tax, and I think that's what they're kind of afraid of, I wouldn't have a problem devoting an entire penny, to facilities and technology. But I think that would have to be a different tax. It couldn't come under this. But I think an entire penny to facilities and technology to make sure that our students are going to have comfortable facilities, state-of-the-art facilities in which to be educated in, and the proper technology, because again, we're in warp speed now when it comes to education, and it's not just competing with the guy that goes to the rival high school. We're competing with students all over the world now. It's a universal challenge. So I wouldn't have a problem with saying let's devote an entire penny if our school board is going to adequately dispense that money across our parish.
Okay. Let's flip to the other tax that's on the ballot on the 28th, and it is a 0.87 millage for the Baton Rouge Police Department. The tax it's being called a renewal because it's been in place since 1958. But this is the first time that it has been brought before the people for a vote. In previous occurrences, it has been simply an administrative matter that has been handled by the government, and they have simply implemented the tax. The Louisiana Legislative Tax Office came back and said that you can't do that it has to be brought before the people. So $1.7 million is believed to be what is attached to this 0.87 millage per year.
Correct.
And that's $1.7 million out of a police department budget of $93 million. I know that your primary attention has been on the school tax, but if you have any thoughts on the police tax, please share them with us also.
Well, I think, again, the primary concern is the school tax, but I'm wondering why we hadn't heard more about this tax. I mean, we know it's there, but it seems like our police department or whoever would have, made sure that this information was out there to the public and we knew exactly what we were voting on. I wish they had done that. I know it's a small amount of their budget, but the question is still, we're going to give you $1 million. Where's it going to go? What's it going to be used for?
$1 million per year.
Your budget. Exactly. $1 million
per year.
You're right.
It's not.
You're right. It's not one
time.
time. This is going to be in your budget. So where's that money going? What's it going to be used for? To me, those questions should be answered before we go to vote. But I guess they didn't think that was important. I'm going to study a little bit more. I certainly am a supporter of our police. I think our new police chief, Paul, is doing a great job. He's hit the ground running. But I'm going to have to study this a little bit more before I can say yay or nay.
Once again, I voted, and I too am very supportive of the Baton Rouge Police Department, despite the Alton Sterling situation and like situations that have taken place over the years. I support Baton Rouge Police. I believe in a strong Baton Rouge Police Department. I am very supportive of Chief Paul and of Mayor Sharon Weston. However, I voted against the tax renewal.
I can understand.
Simply because no one has told me what the money is for or how they plan to use it. And I have serious concerns about police reform. Ever since the Sterling situation took place in 2016, I have been trying to voice my concern that we need to build upon the Alton Sterling situation and make a determination that we're going to have true police reform in the Baton Rouge Police Department. That situations where police officers can serve this community but live out of this community, live as far away as Mississippi in some cases,
and taking those police
and
cars
take those vehicles home with them to Mississippi. Situations where police officers are not subject to some kind of civilian review.
Yes.
When there is a police-involved shooting.
Correct.
Situations where there is no such thing as true community policing.
Yeah.
In this department. I'm just concerned
I understand.
that they have not done enough at this point
Yes.
to be rewarded with this tax renewal.
Yeah.
So I voted no on that. Let me expand from that and ask you a different question that gets back to the church and these events. There was a time. I grew up in a preacher's house. I'm the son of a preacher.
Yes, sir.
There was a time when situations like this, when they came up within the community, community leadership sought out church leadership.
Yes, sir.
And went to churches and to pastors.
Yes.
And talked to them to try to get information from them to help them to form the plans that would then be put out into the
Yes.
community.
Yes.
I don't see that happening today in this time as it did in times past.
Yes.
Is that your feeling also? And if so, what do you think that says?
I think that's why we're in the shape that we're in today as a community, because the church has somehow either been forced to take a back seat or we've just agreed to sit down and to not be involved and to not be the leaders in our community. And I believe that's what God calls us to as pastors and certainly as Christians, to be out front, not to allow others, our civil rights movement. As a matter of fact, the black church, its very foundation was fighting for justice.
Yes.
Its very foundation was fighting for freedom. Its very foundation was speaking for the least of them. And somehow along the way, we've lost that. Somehow we're preaching prosperity and we're preaching worship and praise. And worship and praise of God is extremely important.
Yes.
But where's our works?
Yes.
You know, where is it? And why is our community in the shape that it's in? I believe that it is not only our place, but our rightful place to be up front. Somewhere after the civil rights movement, we were told, well, hey, you know, we've got laws now, we've got attorneys to fight our battles now, we've got our foot in the door now, and everything that we fought for, our ancestors fought for, those who went before us, we're losing it. The church was out front and we gained.
Right.
The church is now taking a back seat and we're losing it all.
Yeah.
I just believe that the only way that we're going to have proper change, and I just believe in God's word. He says to us that on this rock, the very first thing he said about his church is, I'm going to build my church.
Yes.
And the very gates of hell are not going to prevail against it.
Yes.
He's given us the authority. He says, look, I'm giving you the keys to heaven. And whatever you loose on earth is going to be loosed in the earth. Whatever you bind on earth is going to be bound in heaven. So when we realize the power that we have as a church, especially our leaders, and we're not divided and some are being pulled this way and pulled that way, but we will all fight for a righteous cause, which is for God's justice to roll down into the streets of our community, I think then we'll be successful. And our situation is because the church has taken a back seat. Pastors have taken a back seat, and pastors have, and not all, but you know, the majority.
Mm-hmm. It's troubling. We used to have vehicles that we automatically turned to when a situation arose. Our members came to the pastor. If it got too big for the pastor turned to the association.
Yes.
And we looked for help there. If it got too big for the association, we looked to the state
That's
convention.
right. National level. Yeah, that's where you went.
We can't do that today, or we have become distrustful.
Yes.
Of that process. And I'm not one of those people who longs for the good old days, because what I find is that the good old days weren't always that good. However, I do think that we need to recover some of the authority within our community that has been lost, and we need to declare it to the larger community.
That's right.
And then we have to be judicious with the use of the authority that is ceded to us. And, I recognize we're Baptist folk. Baptists are not top down. We're bottom up.
Yeah.
We receive our authority from the membership.
That's right.
And our trust is built into how we use
That's right.
the trust that has been given to us, the authority that has been given to us. And if we're not using it correctly, people will look for other venues.
That's it.
And more often than not, I perceive that people are looking away from the church to find leadership. I also think that a lot of that has to do with the ever-expanding secularization of succeeding generations of black people.
Yes.
Not everybody goes to church.
Correct.
Correct. I was on Constable Reginald Brown's radio broadcast 6 months ago, 7 months ago, and one of the points that I made then is not everybody listens to me. I'm a Black Baptist preacher, and,
Yes,
and there are folk in the black community who don't go to church.
Yes.
And they don't care what the preacher has to say.
Yes.
I say that to say that pastors have to be open to the reality that there are leaders within our community now that don't don pulpits on Sunday morning. And we can't just be dismissive of them, and we certainly can't be negative toward them simply because they're not reverend or pastor or elder. We have to find ways to draw lines of communication with them and build bridges where we work cooperatively with one another, despite the fact that we don't all share the same religious background.
Yeah. I didn't grow up in a pastor's home, but I grew up in a home where my mother and stepfather said, every time the church doors open, you all, my siblings, y'all gonna be there.
Yes.
And I mean, I can just think back just yesterday, and I laugh at it now, how we'd be walking up America Street or up Louisiana on our way to New Sunlight, and the other kids are playing football and whatever, and they're like, "There go them Flowers kids, going to church," and they would laugh at us. We came up in church, and it wasn't all of the kids. Most of the kids in the community in which I grew up in, we went to church. If your parents didn't go, they made sure that you went.
Right.
We were there at Sunday school. We were there for worship. We don't have that anymore.
Right.
Well, I should say it's not as large as it once was. And we've got a lot of folks staying home, and they're staying home. And like you say, there are folks in the community who they're listening to, which we need to form partnerships with, because they have a leadership role to play. And they can be very positive in that role, or they can be detrimental in that role.
Yes.
So we as a church, again, and I think it's incumbent upon us to reach out, not to have them come to us and kiss the ring, but we've got to reach out to them and let them know, that we're here, not just in this community, but we are a part of this community.
Yes.
We want to be good neighbors. We want to be here to ensure that this community is vibrant, that this community has the resources that it needs, that the people in this community are able to move forward as one and to live wonderful lives. But it's got to be, like you say, a partnership, community, our leaders, our churches, and then we can pull the government in and whatever else we need. But it starts with us.
Yes, sir.
And that's where the real work is for the church, to reach out to the community, to reach out to folks who are unchurched, and to let them know it's not about your clothes. It's not about you being able to quote scripture or being able to know every hymn that we sing in the church, but it's about relationship.
Right.
And that relationship oftentimes starts outside of the walls of the church and then works its way in.
Yeah.
We got to go out and get them, bring them in, and then we can work as one. And those that refuse to come in, we got to work with them.
Yes.
And work extremely hard with them to let them know that we're still here, we're still ready to work, and there's still a relationship that needs to be formed.
One of the concerns that I have as I talk to colleagues of mine is there exists, I think, among many of my colleagues, a dismissive attitude toward younger people.
Yes.
Toward younger African Americans. They're not as involved. Mm-hmm. They're not as informed. They're not as motivated.
Yes.
And when they are motivated, it's usually in destructive ways rather than constructive ways. Last time we did this podcast, I had Latangela Sherman here, and one of the things that she pointed out to me is that we are missing out on how informed young people actually are. And she was talking about third graders who voiced intelligent and thoughtful opinions about guns in schools and about arming police officers to, as President Trump has suggested, if we arm all police officers, then we won't have these school shootings. And
the teachers,
and she said that third graders recognized how ridiculous such an idea was.
Yes.
So I'm asking you now to put on your hat as director of the Baptist Student Center of Southern University. I'm sure you have a lot of contact with young adults, young African Americans on the campus.
Yes.
What are your thoughts regarding the level of information and involvement that exists with African American young people today?
And again, I think we have to reach out to them and find them where they are. One of the mistakes that we make, and I think we make it, my belief is that we make it across the board. When we talk about our young people and we point the finger at them, problem is not them. Problem is us. Well, these kids today, no, it's not them, it's their parents. They're only going to do what their parents allow them to get away with. And we as their parents are allowing them to do things that our parents would not have ever allowed us to do. So we've got to recognize that the problem is not with them, it's with us. My contact with young people on Southern's campus, very knowledgeable, very informed. These young people know what's going on in our community, and some of them really want to be involved. Some are involved, but some are waiting at this young age for someone else to lead me, and they really want to be led, but they're looking for people who are authentic. And let me tell you, young people, and I'm sure you know, young people can see through.
Oh, absolutely.
They can peep your game, as they say, real quick.
Yeah.
And when they see that you're not sincere, when they see that you're running a game on them, they are not going to hang around. They're out the door, and they're not coming back. And we've got to realize that. So if we're going to try and connect with them, it's got to be authentic. It can't be for self-serving reasons, but it's got to be really a concern, a genuine concern for them, and allow them to take the lead sometimes. We don't always have to be up front.
Right.
Sometimes we just have to be that wind beneath their wings.
Right.
You know, I've seen situations where adults want to jump out front, when the cameras are around. They want to be seen and whatnot. Allow these young people to take the lead. Allow them, and just be there to support, be there to give advice, be there to encourage them. We don't have to always be up front,
right?
But we've got to be there to support them in their efforts.
This question came to my mind as you were talking. There's a Baptist Student Center up there. There's a Methodist Center up there. There's a Catholic Center up at Southern University. Is there any relationship that exists between those offices?
No.
Do you all work cooperatively?
No. And now that you say that, I mean that's my fault as a director, and I need to reach out to. Now, I have spoken with the young lady who runs the Methodist Center. She and I have had some conversation and talked about doing some things. We just hadn't done them. I have no idea who the director of the Catholic Center is. I think it's the Martin Luther King Catholic Center.
Right.
I'm going to have to reach out to that person, because you're right. There's some things. There's also another group of Baptists with the Southern Baptists. They're also on Southern's campus.
Okay.
And we've had some communication, and we've done some things together. But we all need to work together to ensure that our students have a firm foundation, and to ensure that they know that there's a place where they can come. And that's what the Baptist Student Center is. We want them to know that we're a place where they can come for comfort. We're a place that they can come for direction. We're a place they can come just to get away, and study.
Right.
Come over, free Wi-Fi and things of that nature. But we want them to know that, we want to make sure that their foundation is strong.
Right.
And that's what we're here for.
School tax, April 28th, Proposition 1, 2, and 3. 1 having to do with facilities, 2 with discipline and truancy, 3 with pay raises, millage for the police department. It's called a renewal, but it's actually the first time that it's being brought before the people. Any final thoughts that you want to share with us about that?
No on Proposition 1. No on Proposition 1. No on Proposition 1. Yes on Proposition 3. And yes on Proposition 3. We've got to support our teachers. Let's get out and vote. Get out and vote. Let me say this. When we talk about our president, he's the president of these United States because he woke up what he calls the silent majority in our country.
Right.
Well, guess who's the silent majority in the city of Baton Rouge? Folks who look like us.
Yes.
If we can get out and vote, and we can defeat where we need to defeat and promote where we need to promote, then we can take control of our city. So yes, no on 1, yes on 2, yes on 3, and we're wishing everybody a wonderful week. Get out to the polls. Please vote. Bring others out to vote. It's extremely important. Our ancestors, and I keep saying ancestors, but just our forefathers, just a generation ago, my father and my mother, there was a time when they could not vote.
Right.
It only came about when with the voting rights through the civil rights legislation and some other things that opened some doors for them. So let's recognize this was not 100 years ago.
Yes.
It's in our lifetime that these things have happened. So let's get out and vote, vote, vote.
Thank you so much, Pastor, for coming back this
Thank
way
you,
and
sir.
sharing with us. And thank you for viewing and or listening to the Thrive Podcast. We'll be back again next week.